TV, Tipperary 327, Cork 118. And oh my mother of whatever. I mean, how on earth has that happened? That was incredible. I mean, a tale of two stories. I mean, for Tipperary, it's jubilance, it's joy, it's one of the best probably All Ireland wins I can remember for some time. To be honest with you, one of the best second half performances I've seen from any county in an All Ireland final. But for Cork, like the biggest collapse in All Ireland history, All Ireland final history, without question. I mean, 2 points in the second half for a team of their quality, for a team that have done literally everything right up until this point, a team that have blown teams away, that have played some of the best hurling all year, coming up against a Tipperary team that, look, are a phenomenal team in their own right, and I think they've proven themselves, look, as a team. Look, they won the All-Ireland today, a young team, Darren McCarthy, like they're, people aren't going to be backing against them next year, do you know what I mean? People are going to be saying, look, after what Tipperary have done. And it's kind of similar to Limerick in 2018 a little bit as well, where no one really backed Limerick that year. That a young team, the young players, a few older lads as well, also finished third in Munster. And then it all just sort of clicked, sort of in the, after Munster. And same has happened here with Tipperary. But boy, God, like what a mental final. They outscored Cork 3-14 to 2 points in the second half. I mean, have we ever seen anything like that ever in an All-Ireland final? I don't think we have. Look, fair play to Tipperary. A tremendous day for them. Look, I have the Tipperary jersey on. I do have relatives in Tipperary, one of which who would have played in many of an All-Ireland final like this. And I'm sure wherever he is, he definitely did enjoy that. Looking down and everything else. But yeah, absolutely incredible stuff there from Tipperary to have done what they've done. Look, although I have the Tipperary jersey on, no real bone in the race. If Cork had won, you would have said fair play to them. Obviously, I kind of, wanted Tipperary to win, a bit of a soft spot for them, obviously. And by God, like, I mean, to be 6 points down at halftime, just, the goal right on halftime from Shane Barrett, an absolute killer. You're thinking there's no way, it's going to be tough for Tipperary from here. I thought Tipperary did brilliant in the first half defensively. Ronan Marr was absolutely brilliant. Brian O'Mara had a clinic playing in as the sweeper as well. And Cork couldn't get the goal chances. They couldn't find the way through Tipperary. They were having to work very, very hard for scores. And Tipperary are missing chances. Jason Ford looked a little bit off it. Jake Morris was missing opportunities. John McGrath at that point wasn't really, and I say at that point, wasn't really too much involved in the game. And they were struggling. I thought when Tipperary were floating long balls in on top of Patrick Collins, like what they did in the second half. In the second half, they got a huge amount of joy from it, as we've seen. I mean, all the goals literally came from long puck outs, or long balls sort of on top of the goalkeeper. And yeah, I mean, Cork struggled in regards to that, but in the first half they were winning those battles. Like Sean O'Donoghue was coming out with ball, Owen Downey was as well, and they struggled. They absolutely, Tipperary struggled in that kind of first half. They had that one moment where they got the goal from Jason Ford, and it was ruled out from a square ball, which was hard to kind of tell at looking at replays. We couldn't really get an exact replay to see whether it was the right decision or not. But yeah, like Cork, we're looking good. They were looking fine. Shane Barrett was doing well. Alan Connolly just started to come into it towards the end of the first half. And look, it was always going to be shaky. It was always going to be nervy. I didn't buy into the narrative that Cork were just going to simply blow Tipperary away. I did think they would blow them away a little bit in the third quarter, and I did tweet that. And yeah, it was complete opposite in the end. So another masterclass by myself there. But yeah, like I still thought though that Tipperary would stick with Cork a little bit, and ultimately towards the end, Cork would run out, 4 to 5 point winners. But boy God, I mean, who could have foreseen what happened in the second half? And I'm still not too sure how to explain it, how to describe it, and put the pieces of how it happened. But in the second half, it was just very visible from very early on that Cork something just wasn't right. And I don't know what happened at halftime. I don't know what was said. You can only obviously speculate. But they looked whether Pat Ryan and Cork's management team, maybe it would have been better for them to have been losing at halftime and maybe not gotten that goal, so they could have got a bit of a talking to. But they came out very relaxed, very casual. Patrick Horgan missed that chance from basically a 45, you would say. A free was given very, very early on. Ends up putting it wide, and you were thinking, geez, that's a little bit unusual from Patrick Horgan to miss that. And you kind of couldn't believe that. And it was really from that moment that things kind of spiraled out of control. Tipperary were winning ball. They were popping points over the bar. Andy Ormond started to kind of take an influence in the game. John McGrath started getting on more ball. And all of a sudden you were thinking, right, there's maybe something a little bit in this here. Jake Morris gets a point. Connor Stakelum comes into it as well. And Cork just absolutely imploded like something we've never ever seen before. And look, I tweeted out that it was very similar to Mayo all down the years. And look, to be fair, I tweeted that out when Cork were, only 2 or 3 points down. I didn't expect them to collapse like this. So I actually think, I don't think this is like the Mayo footballers down the years. I think this is worse. This is Mayo were losing to brilliant teams, one of the greatest football teams of all time in Dublin, and they would always push them very, very close. Whereas this Cork team have lost to a young Tipperary side that, has some players in there as well that are probably coming towards the end of their time, some players coming up as well. A Tipperary team that had they have lost today, you would have saw, well, look, they've had a phenomenal year and they'll come back even stronger next year, and they've just completely imploded and fallen apart like something we've never seen before. There was a little bit of unluckiness. They hit the post 4 times in the second half. And that's why I was even mentioning on Twitter as well, like maybe similar to Mayo down the years in terms of like a curse or something. I really don't know, but I've never seen that before where a team has hit the post 4 times in one half. Absolutely bizarre stuff there. And yeah, look, John McGrath gets his goal. Big moment. Bit of a mistake from Pat Collins. It seemed to just hit off him, and then it just bounced back out. John McGrath picks it up. Stays calm, composed, goes around the keeper, puts it into the back of the net. And Cork were just rattled after that. Owen Downey then gets sent off, giving away the penalty not long after that. And I think Tipperary go 6-7 up at that stage, and you're thinking, right, this is over. Do you know what I mean? Like, Cork have a man down. Sometimes getting a player sent off can invigorate you. It can motivate you, like what we've seen in the past. Tipperary themselves finished the game with 14 men versus Kilkenny, and were actually behind as well at different stages when they were a man down. We saw something similar happen with Dublin versus Limerick. Sometimes getting a man sent off, it can, the other players can stand up and they can step up, but it just did not happen at all. Like, Cork just winced into themselves. They fell back into their shell, and they were just a complete shadow of themselves. Like, they couldn't get ball, they couldn't do anything right, nothing was sticking. Patrick Horgan ends up coming off with about 15 to go, and you're thinking, boy God, like, this has gone horribly wrong. Declan Dalton comes off. I thought maybe Pat Ryan got, like, I don't know about Dudzy Healy, like whether that was an injury or whatever, but he'd scored 3 points. Like, maybe he'd gone a little bit quiet in the game, but I think maybe, like, did Pat Ryan panic a little bit and change too much? Like, did he need to take Horgan off? Did he need to take Healy off? It was hard to know, because when Conor Lahan comes on, he doesn't bring anything really in this game. Look, he's a phenomenal hurler, but looked way off the pace of the game, it must be said. Seamus Harney comes on as well, obviously coming back from injury and probably didn't look 100% right. And to be fair, everyone was criticising John Milan and Indo Sport and everything else for what they said during the week about Tipperary flooding bodies inside their own 45 and their own 20 to 30 meter line, and they did that and they got huge success from it. Maybe not to that same extent did they do that, but they did it towards the end of the game and stopped, cut off that goal threat for Cork, and Cork couldn't get in at all. And I thought they panicked. They started going for goals too early. They should have just kept the scoreboard ticking over, because it's still a young Tipperary side to a certain extent, and a Tipperary side as well that had 15 wides. You know what I mean? They could have won this game by even more. And you were thinking, when you were watching some of them wides in the first half and the start of the second half, like, you never thought you could have. You never thought that could you would never have thought they would have still gone on to win the All Ireland. Just absolutely insane, and massive credit has to go to Tipperary. Ronan Maher was absolutely phenomenal. Robert Doyle was brilliant as well. Mike Breen, Brian O'Mara, who goes off, I think, with an injury as well. I actually think he was a bit of a show for man of the match. And then from an attacking extent, like Darren McCarthy, I don't think he put one ball wide. For a 19-year-old who has had, some difficult moments in this year's championship, getting sent off versus Cork, missed a couple of frees versus Kilkenny, missed a couple of chances, got sent off again in that game. He's a young player, inexperienced, bit hot-headed maybe at times, but by God, was he as cool as a cucumber in this game. 1-13, took every chance that came his way. Absolutely phenomenal. Man of the match, well-deserved, and congratulations to him. And he's going to be a player that, is going to be etched into Tipperary folklore, in my opinion, alongside the Noel McGraths, the Shamie Callanans, these lads, John McGrath, Darren McCarthy is going to be in that mix. Your Lara Corbett's, these players, he is going to be in that mix, in my opinion. He's only 19. Tipperary are only going to get better. They're only going to get stronger. And he's going to win more All-Irelands. It's as simple as that. John McGrath, as I said, quiet in the first half, but in the second, came alive, gets the third goal as well. Again, it's a ball in on top of Pat Collins, who's absolutely nowhere. Another big player who had a very disappointing game, in my opinion. John McGrath gets the goal, and unbelievable. Tipperary are coasting towards the end. And there was little cheeky flicks and hand passes. They were basically nearly just taking the piss out of Cork at one stage, and you were thinking, it actually could not get any worse, I think, if you were a Cork fan watching that. That was probably the ultimate humiliation I've ever seen. And there's this kind of expression sometimes in sport sometimes about the pride before the fall, the football gods, the hurling gods, this kind of thing where, and sometimes it happens to me. Look, I'll put a tweet out there and back someone very, very comfortably to win a game, and then, I'll be left with egg on my face. Whether there is any hurling gods out there, I'm not sure. But, during the week, I was seeing Cork, a particular Cork fan get a tattoo on his wrist about Cork All-Ireland Hurling Champions 2025. Even speaking to some Cork fans at Crow Park a couple of weeks ago when they played Dublin. There was a huge amount of arrogance and confidence. And look, I could understand some of it to a certain extent. But it wasn't won. It wasn't done. They still have to go and play a game and beat Tipperary. And I don't know. I think that seeped into Cork's team a little bit, because in the second half, they came out like the game was already won. Like, they were 6 points up. They came out like they were 15 points up. And by the time they'd woken up a little bit, it was too late. And even if they did wake up, and Conor Lahan misses the penalty as well. Like, you couldn't write it. Alan Connolly hitting the bar. Just extraordinary to have saw a level of collapse like that from a Cork perspective. But fair play to Tipperary. Like, they deserve a huge amount of credit. As I said before, it reminds me a lot of Tipperary, of Limerick in 2018. And it kind of is mad, Limerick have won 5 All-Irelands in the last 7 years. And, in 2 of the years they haven't won it, Tipperary have won it twice. But in between 2019 and this year, they've been very poor, haven't they? So it is bizarre. Like, Tipperary are one of them teams that, come every couple of years, and whether it's a heritage thing or something like that, but turning up on the big occasion. By God, there's just something in that Tipperary DNA that, that leads them to step up when it matters the most. And extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We'll run through the comments because there is a lot to run through here, and plenty of comments to go through. Gavin says the Fantastic Four: Arsenal, Mayo, England, and Cork. Jesus, like, for Cork as well to have done the work that they have done this year, the body of work. I mean, like, to have won the league, to have won Munster, to have done what they've done, to have played as well as they have and fallen apart at the final hurdle. I don't think it gets any rougher than that. And I think if you're a Cork fan watching this, I do sympathise a little bit with you, because that must be probably the worst feeling ever imaginable. I've never seen, obviously the Dublin hurlers have never played in an All-Ireland final in my lifetime, but the Dublin footballers have been privileged enough. Every football final we've been in, we've won. But, even the games we've lost in semi-finals, quarterfinals, I haven't seen a capitulation like that, So it's like, especially in a final as well, like, Jesus, when you've looked so good, when you've been so much the favourite. But yeah, did the the talk of Cork fans a little bit online and different things. Did it seep into the team? Were they a little bit overconfident? But yeah, incredible. A2 says, no, seriously, what just happened? Yeah, I think we're all still trying to process it. And even as well, like you could feel it around Croke Park. Look, I think 70-80% of the fans were Cork fans, and fair play to them. Look, whatever you say about them, they back their county. They back and look, as I've said before, you don't want to taint one apple with one brush, with one wall with one brush, whatever the expression is. Cork fans are phenomenal supporters, some of the best in the country. And one or two people who've been overly loud probably in the last couple of years shouldn't taint that, in my opinion. And obviously we've Matthew who comes on the show and everything else. Will we get him on the show tomorrow? I don't know. I wouldn't blame him, to be honest, if he wanted to shy away after a defeat like that. And to be fair, and he even said in the preview that Tipperary could win this game. He said it was a 3-point win for Cork, and even said, look, Tipperary can do it. And we both said we wouldn't have been surprised with a Tipperary win, but just not of that magnitude. Insane. Gavin says it was like the Monaghan Donegal football quarter final, but like Cork's collapse in the second, so much worse than Monaghan's. And A2 says, and here I was saying Darren McCarthy maybe shouldn't start. Yeah, and I was speaking to people during the week about that, and we were saying maybe Oisin O'Donoghue should start. And Jesus, yeah, insane. Cork half-time, Tipperary full-time. 10. So Tipperary was 10-1 to win a half-time. Jesus, you would have got some odds on that. And even with a margin of victory as well. Gavin says, I just knew Cork would miss that penalty, everything that went wrong in that second half. Yeah, it was just one of them things where when it rains, it pours. Do you know what I mean? And it really, really did. And coincidentally, it didn't actually rain in Croke Park today, despite what everyone was expecting. But Jesus, yeah, incredible. A2 says, we did speak of the pressure on Cork, but did anyone see that happen and genuinely can't process what I saw? The mother is from Tip and she's in utter disbelief. Yeah, I think even Tipperary fans and players were probably just like, they can't believe that's actually happened. You know what I mean? Just absolutely insane. And, look, if Cork had have responded and pushed Tip, who knows, maybe they wouldn't have won, but to have fallen back like that was insane. And obviously being down a man as well doesn't help, but absolutely insane. Asa says Cork prefer dry ball than greasy ball. James says Cork are the Mayo of hurling. You know what? Like, they've lost 2 All-Ireland finals back to back now, which not many teams have done. Mayo are one of them that springs to mind. I think Kerry maybe have lost back to back before. I'm not entirely sure recently. But yeah, like, I mean, for them to have had the drought that they've had 20 years, they've lost 3 finals in this decade, and 2 of them have been absolute hammerings, you know what I mean? And 2 of them they've probably been favourites in. They were probably marginal favourites last year, albeit you couldn't say anything bad about Cork in the final last year because they gave it their all. They lost to a very good team. Do you know what I mean? But this and 2021, it was a different kind of Cork team, different management, some similar players there, but a lot more players have kind of come on. Younger players have kind of come into the team since then. But Jesus, yeah, this is, I think, is the worst of them all. It must be said. How on earth do Cork come back from this as A2? Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And the problem is they're always gonna. This is gonna stick with them until they actually go and win it. This is gonna hang over them. And we saw this a lot with teams. Like when you start losing finals, it becomes harder and harder to break that mold, and not many teams do. We were speaking of Mayo; they weren't able to do it. Galway in recent years in football. Galway and hurling had that tag for quite a while. They eventually did break the mold in 2017. Tipperary through the 2000s had some bad results versus Kilkenny until they eventually broke that mold in 2010. So it's a hard one to know. It's a hard one to know, but I haven't seen a team be this, have this level of hype, this level of expectation, and fall as short as they have. It's definitely something we've never seen before. Jared said this is great for Tip, but tough on Cork. Well done, Tip. Well deserved given Tip's year overall. Let's hope Cork don't become the new Mayo. Jesus. Imagine if Tip were as cynical in the first half as the second, and what if Cork didn't get that? goal at the end of the first. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah, like maybe if they don't get the goal, they're on their toes. You don't know. It could have been worse, mate. It's a very, very hard one to know. To be honest with you, to have kind of had that happen. Look, yeah, and look, there was one moment where I think it was a Tipperary player shouldered. I think it might have been Rob Downey in the back. At one stage, or one of the Cork players. Yeah, definitely should have been a yellow card there, but yeah. A2 says poor Matthew is going to be on the first plane to Alaska. Yeah, Jesus, he's yeah, and it's, I know he was there on everything else. I'd say, yeah, geez, I'd say it's tough for him there. Fucking hell, we might have to get him counselling or something after that. Connor says it just wasn't Cork's day today. Acer says Roy Keane's face was fuming after the Tipperary third goal. Yeah, was Roy Keane there? I don't know if he I must have missed that. But Jesus, yeah, like oh yeah, imagine what he would have to say after that. Acer says that's the end of hockey. I hope not. To be honest with you. I would hope not, because look, he's as they've said, I watched the game on BBC, and as they said on commentary many a times, the highest score, the top scorer in the history of hurling, one of the best to ever play the game. It will be sad to see it end this way, but it'd be very hard to come back after that. And there's only so much one man can take. And he probably, by all accounts, wasn't really in the game. He was very, very quiet, wasn't really involved. And you could understand them getting substituted as well. Gavin says just shows the quality of Munster. Clare not getting out this year, and Tip, who didn't last year, winning the All-Ireland. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? You've had, when you think about it, the last three All-Ireland winners have been from Munster. Limerick, Clare and Tipperary. And Cork have been, highly regarded over the last couple of years as well, and have gotten to a couple of finals. Like Waterford are a good team as well. Like if they could get out of Munster, who knows what they could do? Like, I think the gap between Munster and Leinster is there. And I think if you get to a final, then all of a sudden you have a chance. Mikey says the goal at the end of the first half was a curse, gave them a dangerous sense of comfort, which they never got out of. Yeah, and like a 6-point lead in hurling is a dangerous lead. It's a bit like a 2 or 3 point lead in football. It can change within a blink of an eye. Maybe not so much now with the new rules. Like, it can change so quickly. Tip came out with absolutely nothing to lose, and Cork got crushed under the pressure of expectation. And it's mad to think as well, like Patrick Horgan has that chance to put Cork 7 points in front and ends up popping it wide. And, even those little moments, like if that goes over the bar, it could give Cork a little bit more confidence. It could settle them down a little bit more. Mad to think they only pucked, only scored 2 points after that moment. Yeah, incredible. Yeah, insane. A2 says you could see the panic from Cork, the fans in the ground, all the mentors surrounding around trying to work out what to do. Yeah, it was like, there's an expression, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And, Cork took an absolute, scissor kick to the face there, to be honest with you, because they absolutely had no clue what to do. You could see the fans. With it being majority of Cork fans there, it felt eerie around Croke Park. It was like a team playing at home getting absolutely hammered, and the fans just didn't know what to do. To be fair to the Cork fans, they didn't leave early. I didn't see many of them leaving early, or at least the TV didn't pan over the fans leaving early. So you commend them for that. And from looking around, it looked like the majority of them stuck there to the end, and fair play for Cork fans for doing that, because it'd be very easy to leave early with it being such a long journey home. And yeah, that journey home as well. I mean, Jesus, you need the heaviest whiskey going, I think, on that bus home, to be honest with you. Mikey says Darren McCarthy, 19 years old, will be one of the faces of hurling for the next 15 years. Absolutely, yeah. Shane O'Donnell-esque in some ways, kind of bursting onto the scene, being a young player. Incredible, yeah. Gavin says the Clare and Limerick fans won't ever let Dan Casey let this go. Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Unfortunately for Dan Casey, and and I know Dan, and I've done some shows with him and everything else, and he's a lovely man, great man and everything else. And I know he is a bit of a troll on social media and everything else. unfortunately, yeah, like you're just going to have to own it, I think. And that'd be the best way for him to approach it, I think. But yeah, a tough day for him. I'd say you'd probably want to turn your phone off, to be honest. Because yeah, I'd say there's a lot of people who probably have waited probably for this moment. And it is one of them things that, as I've said before, pride before the fall, hurling gods, whatever you want to say. I think when you put things out there, I know, like, there's no correlation with the game really, but I think if enough people put something out there, it can seep through to a dressing room, and it can, and I think Cork is such a crazy county, so so many fans, huge support, players who would have been playing would have friends who are probably there as fans, brothers, sisters, that kind of thing. It does seep in to a team, I think, and I think sometimes it doesn't. And that's when managers and everything else are able to, kind of, brush that aside. And we saw Limerick do that very, very well down the years. But I think it has gotten to them. It has absolutely gotten to them, in my opinion. B says, will Pat Ryan leave Cork now? The main question. Players don't perform on the big day. I think you would. I would like to think it would be up to him. Whether he stays or goes. I don't think, I think if the Cork County Board made any rash decisions and let him go, I think that would be silly, because they still can come back. They have the players to get over the line and win it. It's a difficult one, isn't it? It's a difficult one, because if it happens again next year, you're missing a window then, aren't you? Players could, Shane Barra, Shamie Harnedy, Patrick Horgan, there is a great amount of talent coming through in Cork, but if you lose those players, then you mightn't be able to come back. Joseph says, dreadful Cork second half display. Joseph says, odd bookies still make Cork favourites for the 2026 hurling title. Yeah, maybe the bookies haven't updated. I don't know. A2 says, Michael Doigan mentioned their minors winning with 13 men last year, inspiring the county. Think he was spot on. Absolutely, yeah. And to be fair, Ronan Mars, touching kind of tribute to Dylan Quirk as well, was such a touching tribute. And you saw Liam Cahill in tears as well. And I think they did it for him as well. And they had, you could feel the clapping of the fans and everything else, and it was such a touching moment, and that was brilliant to see, to be fair, for him to kind of get that mention. Joseph says, heartbroken for Cork. A2 says it definitely affected the players. Hat tip to win 11-4, put on 29-27. There we go. Mikey says 2 points in the second half. Yeah, it's just like, when do you ever see a team score 2 points in the second half? You know what I mean? Absolutely incredible there. Mikey says, B says, I wonder will Pat go? Players not performing for him on the big day. And Mikey says this final could damage this team for the next few years. Final losses add heavy baggage. Mayo suffered the same after the 2021 loss to Tyrone. Happens to the fans as well. Sucks all interest and hype. Yeah, absolutely. It could, it'll be very, very interesting to see how they respond to this. Will players leave the panel and everything else? Like I said, I felt like if Cork won today, we could see the start of a bit of a domination period, a bit of a start of Cork. They talked about the blue wave in football with Dublin, a red wave with Cork, and that's what I've said if they were to win today. But now you kind of look at it and think, are they missing that opportunity? So there we go. Alan says, too much talk about Cork are the new Mayo in football. Mayo is getting a lot of slack today, to be fair, aren't they? Jesus. A2 says, Darragh Mack, Ronan Marr, Mikey Breen, John McCrath, Loki, Willie Connors was unreal in the second half too. Yeah, Willie Connors had a brilliant game, to be fair. Anthony says, Cork thought they had it in the bag at half-time. Where were they? They disappeared, vanished. Absolutely, yeah. Mikey says, Tattoo Man will have a new target on his back now. He jinxed him. To be fair, I did listen to him on the radio, and I think he was saying he might change it to 2026. Oh, dearie me. Jesus, yeah. How silly could you be doing that? Do you know what I mean? And I know it probably, an individual thing like that probably has no correlation with the game. maybe it does seep into. I think when enough people do, it probably does seep into the players, kind of mindsets a little bit. But to do that, yeah, just very, 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 very stupid. Scooby says, what a performance. Nobody gave us a chance. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody backed Tipperary going into this. Dinny says, was the hype too much here in Cork? We thought it was a formality. Good on Tip, but Cork's mentally must have been well stuck in the clouds at half time. Yeah, very, very unusual. For them to have they look leggy, they look shattered, they look tired, mental fatigue probably more than anything. Yeah, incredible. Donald says, was it a red card? I think it was. To be fair, I think both were yellows. So I don't think there can be any complaints there. I think Downey, it was a deserved red. I think some were saying it could have been a black, but a black after already having a yellow, it was a red card. So he would have had to have gone there. The biggest bottlers of all time, worse than the Mayo Gaelic footballers, Tipperary sure shattered the myth of Cork invincibility today. Definitely the biggest bottle in an All-Ireland final. Like, I know some people were saying maybe, Limerick Offaly in 94 when Offaly came back. I think this is worse though, to be honest with you, because like Cork are a phenomenal team. Obviously the gap, they didn't have as big of a lead as what Limerick had in that particular year. That way? But for Limerick or for Cork to have been this good all year, to have been this brilliant, to have just gotten a goal and to have only scored 2 points in the second half. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like they just collapsed in a short 5-10 minute period. It was an entire half and they just couldn't recover. And everything they tried went wrong. They were missing penalties, chances hitting the bar. Look, there's an element of bad luck there as well. But yeah, absolutely insane. John says Wexford or Offaly would have even defeated Cork in an All-Ireland final after today. Yeah, absolutely insane. A2 says, so fit and all, McGrath got the final score. What a man. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the thing as well, when you were seeing, Noel McGrath coming off the bench and different players, like you were thinking, I think Tipperary have this. They absolutely have this with the players they can bring off the bench. Pack says here, when I saw Cork at 116 and Tip at 14 points, I had a feeling they were going to start dominating in midfield. Like Kerry versus Armagh, the core is crazy. Impressive to pull off in a final. There was a chance there. Like you were seeing it in the first half. Tipperary were winning a lot of ball. Brian O'Mara, Ron Marr were gobbling up a lot of ball there. Owen Connolly as well. They were winning their, they were doing well on Cork's puck outs. Cork were conceding the short puck out as well. So Tipperary were doing very, very well. It was just in an attacking sense where, a couple of chances were going wide and you were just thinking, they're not quite capitalising here, and you thought they would go back to rue those chances, but they didn't. They came flying out in the second half, and once they got that goal, like it was just complete capitulation from Cork, no doubt about that. But yeah, look, congratulations to Tipperary, an incredible win, All Ireland for them, first one since 2019, and as well as that, to think of where Liam Cahill was this time last year. There was people talking about Liam Cahill leaving Tipperary, losing his job. People talking about Tipperary, one of the worst Tipperary teams of all time, was being brandished about. And look, they'd had two very bad years, one under Liam Cahill, another under Colin Bonner, I think it was. And things just fell apart really, really badly. Not getting out of Munster. And I don't think anyone would have predicted them to have won the All-Ireland this year. Absolutely no doubts about that. Like that's... No one could have seen, could have foreseen what they've done this year. And yeah, like Liam Cahill deserves a huge amount of credit as well to have had the year that he had last year. And let's not forget, things went quite sour at Waterford towards the end as well. And there was a lot of people criticising him leaving Waterford and going to Tipperary and the sort of bit of bad blood there and everything else. For him to have done what he's done and turned things around, absolutely incredible from Liam Cahill there, and he deserves a huge amount of credit, a huge amount of praise that deserves to go his way, and the Tipperary players as well, and even some of the changes he's made, Liam Cahill, bringing fresher players into the team as well. So there we are. A2 says Limerick had no time to respond in 94. Cork had an entire half and scored less than an under 14 camogie team. Yeah, Jesus, very, very bad stuff there from Cork, no doubt about that. But look, congratulations to Tipperary, commiserations to any Cork supporters who are watching. And we'll be back tomorrow to discuss this in depth and in more detail. Be interesting, most certainly, to get Matthew's opinion on it, if we can track him down. But if not, we'll be here anyway to discuss it in more detail. So yeah, cheers on anyone tuned in. Hit the like button and subscribe if you could. Congratulations to Tipperary on the Premier County, and I'll see you all later.